The topic for our discussion, our next panel discussion, is seamless and efficient air travel experience in Africa through harmonized cross-sectoral approach. Seamless and efficient air travel in Africa through harmonized cross-sectoral approach. My panelists to help me get round with this topic are Mr. Shaheb Martin, Managing Director, Commercial Marketing, Africa and the Middle East, Boeing. If he's here, please come up. A round of applause as he comes up, ladies and gentlemen. Next is Professor Dr. Adem Sumunderu. He's a project contracted expert, Yaza. Another round of applause for Prof. Thank you. Next is Mr. Ali Tonsi. He is the Secretary General of Airport Council International, Africa. Thank you. And last but not the least, for purposes of diversity, we just heard Ms. Eva Nishimwe, who is Deputy Managing Director, Rwanda Airports Company. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't be your moderator, and I promise you we'll leave for lunch right on time. Thank you. You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about seamless and efficient air transport. This morning we heard in one of the presentations that African airlines collectively made a profit of $0.9 last year as a net profit. And this was a big achievement considering that several years past, they've always been in the negative collectively. But 0.9 US dollars, that cannot be considered efficiency if you look at it just at the profitability level. But first, let us look at seamless connectivity. Our topic for discussion seems to connote that there is no seamless travel on the continent. How serious is this problem? And I'll start with Ali because you manage airports and you know what the connectivity levels at African airports are. Thank you. Just speak.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. About travel and connectivity in Africa, yes, just to tell my experience coming to here, I spend 24 hours. When it's a direct flight, would be 5 hours. So this is one pain that most of Africans suffer when they travel inside Africa. And this is in fact the result of what happened in Africa, as my colleagues before said. We create this problem. We create this problem because we didn't want to solve, we didn't want to open our market. And in the end, we get more and more problems, and on the other side, we lose connectivity. When I come to ACI 16 years ago, the percentage of implication of African airlines in the total African traffic is about 30%. Now it's about 15%. So we lose a lot. We lose a lot, and we give this part of the traffic for outsiders. We didn't success to implement SATAM. And this is one point that we should look at. SATAM, and before it was Yamoussoukro decision, or was implemented 30 years ago, but till now, we didn't succeed to have it. The question is, what should we do? If a project is not efficient, we should stop, hold, and look back, what the problem, and go back and refurbish the strategy, which is not happening. We never ask ourselves what happened for Saddam, what's the problem? Now airports are very happy to have more traffic, but we have no traffic. And this is the problem. We have no traffic, we invest in infrastructure, we invest in quality of service, in equipment, but there is no traffic. Traffic is mainly made by outsiders, but nothing from Africa. All the CEOs here try to do it, but as my colleague said, when they come back to their country, they refuse, they stop the process. And this is the situation now. We are suffering and flying from Tunis to Kigali, we spend at minimum 24 hours instead of 5 hours. So this is the result. So we should look back to our decision, to our strategy in Africa, and to look for a new strategy, not to copy and paste. Look deeply what's happened, what's the problem, and now we try to create an African solution, not to copy and paste.
Thank you for that. 24 hours to move from one African country to another. That must be daunting. I mean, it's serious. But at times I always ponder to ask, is the issue because there are no flights, or is because there is no business relationship between the regions? So if you look at the situation between Sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, connectivity is a major issue. But I'm not too sure where to place the problem. Is it because we don't have a business relationship, largely, or it is just if we put the aircrafts there, the business will follow? I don't know, Prof, what do you think?
Well, I think when we look at the point you mentioned and what Ali indicated, the market in Africa generally is very fragmented, yeah, as we know, and pushing the agenda for establishing a seamless model, we need to look at the context of the region. Yeah, a number of factors here. One, we need to look at the geography side of Africa, you know, because here we're in this house to discuss air transport. But we have to take into context that when we look at air transport, it's an enabler, as you mentioned earlier, okay? It's a catalyst driver, but we need to look at the impediments also that might restrict fully functional air transport. We talk about the road networks too. So when you look at the road network structures within the continent, they're very poorly developed, as you can see. But of course, if we're talking about seamless, it's not about seamless in air travel, about seamless in transport networks. Yeah? So within that context, we all can see that the fragmentation is also very much defined by the regional economic community groups. We have almost 8 different RECs here. Okay? So when you look at the RECs structures, we can also say that there is, you know, overlaps in so many areas. You know, jurisdictional overlaps, you know, competition issues. And when you talk about creating a harmonized framework, for example, yeah, that's already a huge challenge, you know. How can we harmonize a framework when we already have 8 different jurisdictions, you know, which obviously have overlaps in some extent. The other side is when you look at the other element of, I would say, the technology and the digital revolution in Africa, you know. I think from the African perspective, as what Ali said, we cannot cut and paste. I know I'm based in Europe, but when I look at the African market, you know, we need to create our own bespoke solutions, you know. Africa needs its own solutions, but the context is that we are still very much behind in the digital revolution side of things. So when we look at it, overall, I think we can say that we need to find solutions where we need to start depoliticizing, you know, decisions. Because as what some of the colleagues mentioned earlier, I think Aaron mentioned, you know, we need to drive a more commercial mindset, you know, and then move away from politics a bit. I think once we disentangle that kind of narrative, I think we can see some traction within the industry. But of course, it's very important that we need to start collaborating, you know, to create seamless travel, but the challenge is also very much aligned with issues in terms of, fleet structure in Africa, and most African carriers is relatively weak. If you look at the balance sheets, of course, mostly they're bleeding cash anyway. So when you look at collaborations and cooperation, you're basically looking for synergies, yeah? Okay, how can we collaborate? We need to find reciprocal gains. So I think that will be the biggest constraint, when you talk about creating a complete seamless travel market, when we still have some huge challenges that we need to redesign in order to create a more viable air transport market.
Well, thank you for that. Martin, if I may come to you, at times the issues seem to be airlines want to operate to certain destinations, but unfortunately, they don't have the right equipment. So you will probably, the smallest aircraft you have in your fleet probably is a Boeing 737. And you want to operate a city pair where the max passenger throughput per day is less than 100 passengers. And probably there's already an operator on that route. So you look at it and say, do I really want to use this big aircraft to operate on this small route? Now, but we also know that having different types of fleet is not also very economical, especially considering the size of our countries. So how do we address the issue of seamless connectivity in the face of these 10 routes that we have and the limited aircraft that we have?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, from the OEM perspective, and working not just with airlines in Africa, but airlines all over, and this has been brought up, or at least alluded to, it's being strategic and being intentional about the plan, because we talked about a lot of airlines in Africa, a tremendous amount of airlines, but overall very small fleets. And often those fleets are comprised of 2, 3, or even 4 different major model types. I'm not talking about a 37, 800, 900, something like that. I'm talking about, you have a Q400, an Embraer product, maybe a Boeing product, maybe something else, and 1 or 2 of each. And that's very inefficient, right? So it's hard from the capital structure of the airlines. And you have to ask how you got there, and often we see airlines getting there because they become desperate for lift, and they'll take whatever is offered to them in the short term. But if airlines are able to plan a little bit further ahead, if they can have a strategy that's at least 5 years out, even though it's a day-to-day operation, to have someone looking that far ahead, and then to have the discipline to enact that strategy going forward and do that for year after year after year, you can then simplify your fleet. And the other benefits of this are enormous, right? So it has the cost benefit, right? So your training of your flight crews, your maintenance, your MRO power when you go to negotiate a contract. But it also has significant safety implications. I know safety comes a little bit later in the week. But as an OEM, we've even acknowledged that as we try to go up in rate, and we worked with the FAA through some of our own challenges, one of the key metrics that we look at is proficiency of the mechanic putting the aircraft together. That is measured by how often they do the same job on the same aircraft. So, and the same can be applied, of course, to the maintenance of a fleet. All this getting around to your question of what you do if your smallest, aircraft is still maybe too large. Well, you can fly less frequencies. Sometimes we see they have small, a Q400, but you have it flying 4 times a day or twice a day. Sometimes that can be replaced, by a single aircraft. Sometimes you need the Q400. Sometimes you need that smaller gauge. And you just have to try to balance that with your other needs. The other thing is flexibility, right? So can you have a fleet that's comprised of as few major families as possible to give you the flexibility? And if that major family, in the case of the 737, right, you can go from soon the MAX 7 all the way up to the MAX 10. You can go from just over maybe 100 seats up to well over 200 seats. And you have complete flexibility in how you utilize that asset because you have the same flight crews. You can interchange, your maintenance and so forth and so on. That's not to say it's easy, right? And optimizing within the capital cost to the airline, the fleet size, the fleet restrictions. But to some of the other conversations that were just had, how can you utilize partners? How can you make smart decisions about where your customers want to fly? And maybe it's something that comes up a little bit later in our conversation about how you plan networks. But I think all those things have to be considered. And from the OEM perspective, that's how we would look at it.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Eva, I come to you slightly differently. You know, elsewhere in the world, airports actually are the ones who are very active in route development. They take the initiative, they go to markets, airlines, and try to promote their airports with a view to attracting them to come into their destinations. In Africa, it's hardly the case. What is happening?
Thank you.
Why don't we have airports involved in this?
I think one of the biggest issues is we're still looking at our airports as public infrastructure, so state, right? So not as a business. So we didn't really go and develop the route development capacity. We don't take the initiative. We wait for the government to bring us people, for people to come to us. And instead, we need to now look at it the other way and start training our people, teaching them how to use data to then analyze the market and understand what needs to be done in terms of route development. We need to take that initiative and go out to people and bring them in, and incentives, right? So Kigali International Airport, for example, we offer an incentive to new airlines where we can negotiate parking fees, landing fees, so that we try to reduce those expenses, you know, for the first year or so. And so I think if we look at it that way, then we'll be able to start that business and actually attract more airlines to our airports.
But you do that when the airlines come to you. You offer the incentives when they come to you. You don't go out there to promote the incentives as a way of attracting them to come.
I think the way we would be doing it is actually you go out, and we talked about this earlier, working with the tourism boards and all of that. If you go together as a team and you go to those airlines, you go to those countries and you say, this is what we can offer you if you come to Rwanda. So I think that's the way we should be looking at it.
Ali, do you have something more to add to that?
Yes. In fact, it's more complicated than this. Behind the willing to attract airlines and to go to attract airlines, there is BAZAs, there is agreement, air transport agreement. If, for example, from Rwanda and Tunis, there is no agreement, why should I go to attract Tunisair? This is one. This is the first, which is...
So the bilateral air services agreement
Yes.
must
In fact,
be
this is the
established
basics.
first.
This is the basics.
Yes.
Which maybe some people didn't know it. But to create a route, it's not the airport decision or the airline decision. It's the government-to-government decision. And this is the basics. And this, sometime when we go to routes conferences, there is one pillar which is absent, which is civil aviation. So we can try to attract them, but in the end, there is no right to fly or to come. This is first. The second, which is for me very, very important, is the attraction of the destination. What does it mean? Suppose that you are in a country where there is no hotels, no tourism attraction, and no business. Either when you fly for free, when you have free ticket, free accommodation, you have nothing to do in this country. And for me, this is the pillar. We should work on the attraction of the destination. Rwanda made it very, very well when we see the tourism lady coming and explain how the vision, how to attract more. In fact, for me, developing Africa goes through developing the destination. We can make all the SATAM regulation, we can open the skies and everything. When there is no attraction of the destination, we have nothing to do in these countries. So, the pillar is to develop your country, to open the skies, to have more business sides so people want to come to visit your country. Otherwise, you made everything, but there is no attraction. You have nothing to do. This is one. But the second is, which is very important, is the culture of aviation in each country. What does it mean? In fact, in certain countries, aviation is a luxury. It's not accessible for all. So it's keeping very, very high and very taxable. So the government asks for a lot of taxes. So it's limited the access. And with that, if you have no attraction, no businesses out in your country, and the aviation is supposed to be a luxury, you have nothing. And for me, this is the pillar that should be looking for and discuss it in high level to open to open and to grow traffic. Otherwise, we do SATAM, we open, we give freedom, but if there is no attraction of the destination, we have no flight.
Wow, that's interesting. Prof says we can do all the regulatory developments we want, but the destination must be attractive. There must be a reason why people should travel. Otherwise, they will not. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, to some extent, Ali, destination is a key part of, driving the volume of air traffic, as you said. But within that backdrop, if you like, we need the regulatory models, to facilitate, for example, free competition, ensure that there is no predatory behavior with airlines, something that can create an even playing field. Yeah. So the need for regulatory framework is very much needed, but of course, as what Ali said, if you push the destination agenda to bring the traffic that is required, we also need to look at other multiple actors within the value chain. So on the civil aviation side, you mentioned earlier about bilateral air service agreements, which I'm not really an advocate for, so to speak, personally, purely because I think if we try to develop an open skies market, we should be driving more multi kind of cooperation, Yes. Because right now, if you look at the initiative towards SATAM, we are already since 2018, SATAM is basically the offshoot of Yamoussoukro, so to speak, yeah? But we're talking about 40 years ago, yeah? And the question is always, where are we now in terms of progress, yeah? We still have some huge challenges on the continent, The infrastructure is a challenge, the element of, bilateral air service agreements. If you look at the fleet structure, is what Shab said, if you look in Africa, some have 3, 4, and out of those 3, 4, probably 1 is functional. The extreme cost of MRO, procurement of spare parts. I can go on and on, yeah? So in the end, I think when you look at it at the end of the day, the driving factor is that there has to be national strategic agenda to push destinations, That's right. So whatever is going to come out of it, it should be aligned with aviation, Yes. But as you said, Ali, it's not a luxury. Transport is a tool, Yeah, it's a tool that we need to ensure that we get those people to those destinations. But at the same time, how well attractive are those destinations too, to justify air travel connectivity, so to speak. So in a nutshell, Raphael, I think there are far too many moving parts right now. Yeah. So the question now is to get the alignment now. Yeah. So basically, when I look at it from an analytical perspective, we are operating in silos. Yeah. Okay, you got the tourism board there, you got the airport authorities there, okay, you got the regulators there, you got the airlines there. So if we can create that seamless element of one, we need to start sharing data, And one key impediment within Africa, I can say it in good faith, is we're not driving the data part of it, yeah? So, you mentioned earlier, the issue of how do you find those routes? You cannot make decision on route development just by instinct, what does the data say, So in the end, I think once we can be able to align on that common vision, we can drive the continental model of establishing a single open skies market. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin, if I come back to you. Now, the OEMs are partners of the airlines. And in Africa in particular, the airlines are having these challenges which are actually holding back the opportunity for them to grow, expand, and by extension, invest more in aircraft. I'm not too sure whether behind the scenes the OEMs are doing something or are engaging with our states or our governments in trying to get them to unlock the markets, or if they are not, whether this is something that the OEMs are willing, and Boeing in particular is willing to do, to complement what the airlines themselves are doing. Because somehow we need a multi-sectoral approach to this issue, because the airline seems to be pushing, but the markets are still not accessible. And because the markets are not accessible, we cannot grow the traffic. What can the OEMs do to assist?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We all understand here that aviation is an ecosystem that's been brought up already today, but we need to really consider how broad that ecosystem is, right? It's not just the airlines or the OEMs, it's the trainers, the maintainers, the governments, the financiers, the lessors, everyone, right? So what can an OEM do? Well, I'll tell you that, I'll use Nigeria as maybe an example that's been in the news in the last year or so of working to try to help that aviation ecosystem a bit. And we're doing it with the Boeing Finance Corporation, right? That's an internal resource to Boeing. We're doing it with my marketing team, with our sales teams, with our government operation teams, with our office in Africa in Addis. And we're going to talk to not just the airline, but again, we're going to educate financiers and banks, both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. We're working with the Department of Transportation in Nigeria. We're working to explain how that market is developing to others who might be unfamiliar with the African market or the Nigerian market. So to answer your question directly, yes, we absolutely want to take part in that. We understand the importance to our customers and to aviation. We were challenged once and said, well, Boeing, why are you doing this? Aren't you helping your competition? We said, that's fine. We'll compete on aircraft anytime. That's not a problem. We want to raise the whole tide, right? Rise all the ships. And the only way to do that is to work throughout the entire ecosystem. So what Boeing can bring is, we have relationships with US Exim Bank. So we can bring US Exim in to help with the financing market. We can go and talk to lessors and help promote the airlines. We can help the airlines promote themselves in terms of educating them on what maybe other third parties are looking for to give them confidence to invest or to place aircraft or to bid for that airline, right? And that's, of course, true anywhere, but like I said, Nigeria is the one that's been in the news maybe most prominently in the last number of months, specifically with getting to Cape Town ratified there. Raising their score overall from in the 40s to in the high 70s now. Last I saw, I think it was 79. All things to make them a more attractive place for people to invest, whether it be financing, whether it be placing aircraft, new or used. And yes, that raises the appetite for any aircraft to be placed there, and that's fine. But it's going to help the market develop. That's going to hopefully help them be more able to continue to invest and grow, and that's what we can do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Raphael.
Yes, you want to do something?
Can I just
go ahead. Yeah, just
disrupt
add
a
to
bit?
that. Yes.
Sharp. I think when you look at it, when you look at the whole entire ecosystem, it's also important to take note that if you look at Africa, the volume or the number of startup carriers is very low. So generally focusing on already well-established incumbents might basically push aside any potential of startups. Africa needs growth in startups, that's for sure. And one of the main constraints is access to capital. Obviously, if you look at startup rates by ratio, for example, in Africa we have the least number of startups, airlines. And if they do start up, it's only a PowerPoint startup, so to speak. So having said that, I think it's fundamentally important to take a look at that. If Boeing as an OEM, you're working with other value chain actors within the ecosystem, identifying also the potential of startups as an incentive to kickstart market growth will be a very key part of how to develop the African air transport market. Because in the end, if we only focus on already well-established carriers, for example, we don't see the growth that we're looking for. Growth has to be taken from multiple lenses, I would say. So, of course, there are some constraints, starting up airlines in Africa. There are a lot of hurdles, the ownership and control structure plays in, you take a look, where will you be registered and all the rest of it, But generally, I think when we try to drive that momentum of how we can achieve where we want to establish the African continent as a market, we need to look at it from those multiple lenses, rather than traditionally focusing on existing carriers. The market has to open up, that's for sure. Because if you take a look, the general market structure right now, the barriers are very high. Not only capital expenditure barriers, but we talk about the motion of starting an airline is something that is proving more and more difficult. So having said that, I think what we want to see within the continent is an even playing field, irrespective of how big your brand is. So in the end, if we can allow, a proliferation of low-cost carriers, so to speak, I don't know if you can even call them LCCs, Okay, so in the end, we can create that kind of viable air transport market that we're looking for.
Startup.boeing.com. We have a team that does that. We have a team that's underneath our leasing channel within marketing. Gentleman's name is Craig Austed, and he's joined by Jason Bender. And they will help us vet startups all over the world, and then they will help them, move their business model along. Obviously, underneath our leasing channel, so they have a lot of good resources as well for if they find a startup that they think has what it takes to become a good airline, they can promote that within the leasing channel immediately. So, to answer your question, we do that too.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Okay.
But I think, Prof, on the small number of startups on the continent, I think if you look at the failure rate of startups, airlines on Africa, you would actually think twice and probably think a third time before you want to start an airline, because the failure rate is very, very high. Even though there are a lot of airlines a lot of investors and entrepreneurs trying to come into the space, they always look at what has come and disappeared in no time, and the cost of that, and most of them actually shudder away, because also the cost of capital is high, and the startup, the basics you need to actually start is quite expensive. But that notwithstanding, on airport infrastructure, Ali, I just want to find out, look, we're talking all about trying to grow this market, but I think if you look at even the infrastructure we have today, if our traffic were to grow by 15% next year, are you sure the infrastructure we have in Africa at the airports can cope?
Yeah, sure. In fact, just to tell you, if you have one flight a day, this is the actual situation of maybe 70% of traffic in Africa. But if we double or triple it, instead of one flight, now it's 3 flights a day. It's the same. It's the grow the capacity. It's grow the traffic without adding the capacity, because the capacity is already there. Mainly for big airport, that adding capacity is problematic, because we need more runway, more capacity, more terminal. But in major part of the continent, 80% of airports is about under 1 million passenger a year. So adding more traffic, it's not a big impact. Looking at the runway is there, the terminal is there, and we have overcapacity. The problem maybe is about these infrastructure. It's a bit old, and the main problem is how to refurbish, how to update, how to upgrade this infrastructure, because most of the airports are not efficient financially. This is the main problem. They didn't attract investors. They didn't attract founders, because it's not financially efficient. When the airport is small, under 1 million, no one wants to invest. Yeah, and this is the main problem in infrastructure of small airports. And most of the countries suffer about that, because they need funding, they need money to ameliorate the infrastructure, but there is no one to help them. And this has become big issue, because the forecast of traffic in the next 25 years, it will be maybe three times more. So now we are about 250 million in Africa, and in 2050 we will be about 725 million passengers per year. And most of this traffic goes to main region, mainly North Africa and South Africa, and some airports in the coast. But most of the airports still the same, so there is no big traffic coming. And this is when you realize that most of these small airports, there is no attraction of the destination. We come back to the other. So either there is progress, but this progress is not like, for example, Rwanda, when there is a strategy to ameliorate the attraction. So they are very flat. There is nothing happen, and they work for just a growth which is at average of 3%. But there is no big traffic, big increase of traffic, nothing. It's very smooth. And for me, it's there is not very big need of investment. But it's still very small. Looking at the continent, we are about 20% of population, but the traffic is about 2%. And it's decreasing, it's not increasing compared to the world. Yeah. And this is, as I said, we should come back and look what happened. We should look to find a new solution, not the SATAM. SATAM is a bit old now. We should find a real African solution how to progress traffic. Otherwise, we will still working on Yamoussoukro, SATAM, Yamoussoukro. And in the end, they bring nothing. This is personal. It's not unofficial. It is personal. We should find a real solution for Africa to grow the traffic. Otherwise, we will still like this for the next 3 decades or 4 decades.
I think we will engage separately on finding the alternative solution, because that is very interesting. If you have some ideas, that will be very much welcome. But if I can go to Eva, look, Rwanda has adopted a policy of no visa for all African citizens. Has this impacted the traffic arrivals in your country by air?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first things is we're here today, right? So you can go anywhere, but we've now become a destination that, especially for MICE, for example, people want to host their conferences here because they know you don't have to worry about people not getting their visas at the last minute, right? And so it is in that vein that as a country we decided to go much further. You know, we can look at conservative traffic forecast, but we decided to build an even bigger infrastructure, anticipating that all these changes we're making are going to bring the people to us. And if everyone else follows along, right, and I don't have to ask for a visa to go to just a neighboring country, because it really is an issue. But if you don't do that, then that growth that we're trying to get will get there. And if I can even go back on what Ali was speaking about with the infrastructure, right? If, you know, sometimes I think everyone thinks, well, I have to build a new airport, right? If I want to accommodate the growth, I just have to build a new airport. Yeah. And in some cases you do. But you can also work with what you have and modernize it. You know, I'm a big fan of tech, right? And sometimes I ask my team, you know, you'll find during the peak hours, because like he said, we underutilize our infrastructure a lot. Sometimes you have that morning peak, evening peak, in the middle there's nothing. But then you come during the peak and you find a line of people with just a carry-on, and they're lining up for check-in. My first question is, why don't you check in online?
Yeah.
Right? And so things like that will make it so that we're not always fighting for space while you then look for the funding, which I believe in PPPs, you know, as a big way. That's what we did as Rwanda with the new airport we're building, looking for partners to help us fund that new infrastructure when it is necessary. But for right now, we can work with what we have and just make it more efficient. How we work, you know, biometric gates, immigration, all of that. We can do that with the infrastructure we have today, and then also work then on the big facilities after.
Yeah. So you will respond to that, but in addition to that, just tell me why we're not having a proliferation of many countries allowing other Africans to come home without visa. But go ahead.
This is very political. In fact, look, if you are neutral, just looking for Africa, some region between, for example, North Africa, Algeria, and Morocco, there is no traffic, there's a lot of political problem. If you look on the other side, Algeria with Mali, there is no flight. If you look on the other side, Rwanda and DRC, there is no flight, and so on. So we are fragmented. We cannot make something together when they are fragmented. So we should look in our cuisine before opening. It's internal. Africa is very diverse. It's very, sometimes we have our own problem, and we cannot push when there is no friendship. As I said, there is no friendship. Now, most of our problem is political problem. We, as we are here, we have the willing to open everything, to have no restriction. But we didn't have our own decision. There is ones behind us that decide for us. It's the case for airports, it's the case for airlines. They never decide. They just apply what they are told to do. Airports are here and they are willing any traffic. But if there is no visa, there is no air traffic agreement, nothing happens. This is a problem in Africa, it's political. We are all willing to do, all willing to grow traffic and to do everything, but in the end, it's plenty of political problem, and in the end, it gives nothing.
It's difficult. You know, we're talking about air transport now. It's turned into a political. Now it's good that there are political dimensions to this. But before we explore that further, allow me to remind my audience that I would give you the opportunity in the next couple of minutes to ask at least 3 questions, if you have them, before we close this session. So I'll go back to my panelists, but I'll come back after this round, and then we can ask some questions if you do have them, and before we take our lunch break. In the meantime, I am informed that we have in our presence the ECOWAS Commissioner for Infrastructure, Energy and Digitalization, Mr. Sadiku Duaka. If he is here, if you can just stand up and let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. You're most welcome. We missed you earlier this morning, but it's good you are here, and we look forward to some of the good things that ECOWAS is doing for the region. So, if I can come to you, Prof. We're talking about visa access as one of the elements of facilitating seamless travel. Africa, it's a major challenge. In Europe, you just move like you're moving across the same country. What should we begin to do to unlock the visa problem?
Well, I mean, we can use Europe only as a benchmark model, you know, because when you look in Africa, I think when you're discussing the visa openness index, you know, the score sheet, the balance scorecard, if you like, you find that the number of countries that are still very much constrained by the visa issue. And we also have to take into account that visa charges basically in most cases are a source of revenue stream for the government, yeah? Or whoever is collecting that visa. So in the end, I think when we say we want to create freedom of movement across the African continent, the question is, do we have the regulatory policy frameworks in place if we need to deal with illegal immigration, for example? Yeah, because everybody is, you know, there's so much lip service on visa openness, you know, but not even one is mentioning how do we deal with illegal immigration too, yeah? Because if you look in Africa, no, in Europe, the EU, the Schengen states, yes, they created that model, and now they're paying the price also at the same time, you know, because one of the biggest hot topics on the political agenda in Europe now is how do we deal with illegal immigration, yeah? Having borderless markets creates an avenue, corridor also for illegal immigration. of course, we want to facilitate movement of people across the continent, but we need to understand the underlying purpose of those travelers. Yeah? If you don't have a well-established model that basically regulates illegal flow, because basically you could lend, okay, so it's visa-free entry because you're part of the African community, and then what next? Because that particular traveler will need access to other resources, healthcare, education. But if you came on a ticket that doesn't allow you to work, then obviously you will have another issue to deal with post-visa openness too. So in the end, I think when you look at the need for visa, I think it's very important that we do open, yeah, we facilitate, just to make the process less tedious, yeah? Because if you look at the amount of paperwork that you might have to go through for an African traveler to visit neighboring country, whatever the case might be, yeah? But obviously, as what Eva said, and the other lady colleague mentioned about Rwanda being the more or less like the model, you know, of how to attract, you know, FDI, you know, how to attract, you know, foreign players into the country, for example, is very much aligned to the country's agenda on driving openness. Yeah, but obviously openness comes with some restrictions too, because otherwise, you know, it's not one open for all. You know, you need to have a framework that can also underline why we need to regulate the flow of people. But at the end, I think, just to close up on this, I think if you do look at how we're experiencing the issue of visas in Africa, for example, we have over 8 racks here, yeah? Okay, why we don't start by creating a pan-African visa system, you know, that is digitalized, that allows African people, I mean, I'm African too, African to basically access, you know, the different regions based on one single visa model, yeah? But obviously to do that, you need to build and align a concept model that can allow this kind of freedom of movement to actually take effect within the continent.
I think those sort of exist within the economic zones. So for instance, I think the East African community, they can move around without visas within their community.
But that's still fragmentation, Raphael.
In the West African sub-region, they do the same.
Yeah.
Now, what I think you're agitating for is, can we do it now across those regions?
Yeah.
So for instance, can the West African come to East Africa visa-free? Yeah. And can the East African go to West Africa visa-free? Just like how their own citizens are doing. I don't know where the fear is. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this visa issue? I'm not sure.
Well, all this sounds wonderful, except I'm an American, so I might still have to be paying the visa, which is fine. You know, from the OEM perspective, and maybe this is tangential at best, but we look at how people want to travel. This is a big thing that we study within Boeing for our commercial market outlooks, as well as for when we consult and work with airlines. And we've seen a number of things, right? People want to go as effectively or as efficiently as possible between their origin and their destination. Ideally, that's point to point, and as seamlessly as possible, right? So visa-free would be part of that. And this has been proven out, right? This is not just me saying this as a OEM person up here. This was part of how we developed the 787. If you can create a product that will give you the efficiency necessary so it can be operated, it'll open new markets, and it opened over 400 to date. Because people want to go as quickly and efficiently as they want to, you know, between two locations. And I think that's part of this whole story, is how do you effectively travel efficiently? Yeah. Remove any barriers that could keep people from making a decision not to make that trip, or to avoid your airport or your throughput. If they think, oh, what if I get delayed there and I need there's some other legality to having to stay here overnight or something, right? You can remove any of those barriers and potentially make it easier for the governments and the airports to also allow for that.
Yeah, thank you. Now, can I go to my audience? Any questions from the floor? I see a hand up here. Can we have the microphones, please? Do we have microphones in the room? was told we had microphones. Okay, bring one to the front here. Are there any other hands up? I've seen ECOWAS. Bring it to the first row here. Okay, so you, after asking your question, let us know who you're directing it to. If it's also a general question, you let us know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Good morning, everyone. My question goes to Professor Dr. Aiden. He spoke earlier on about the hindrance to get a free movement for people in Africa, that is visa-less. And I would like to ask him, how does he feel? As an African, you cannot go within Africa without being subjected to some administrative, board, how do you call it? Some administrative issues to get your visa as a West African to go to South Africa, for example. I will need a visa. And whereas someone from outside our region, outside Africa, can come into Africa without visa. So, and I know in ECOWAS, we have free movement of people and goods. We travel without visa. And yes, there's an economic, there's something we are missing if you're not asking for visa on travelers, but we were able to do it since the establishment of ECOWAS. So my question to him is, how does he feel as an African to be subjected to this when other people from outside our continent can come freely without visa? Thank you.
Okay, so Prof, the question is simple. How come that we don't trust our neighbor to come into our country, but we rather trust somebody who is from several thousands of miles away, who doesn't look exactly like us, but we deny our colleague who looks like us access? That's the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, lady from ECOWAS. I mean, I think with all participants in this room, we'll all agree that visa remains a constraint in Africa. Firstly, before I move into my personal feeling regarding the constraints, we need to look at the underlying challenges that brings visa controls. Yeah? Firstly, I just highlighted here, I think one, we have very complex, inconsistent visa policies on the continent. You move to one country, they have their ball game. You move to another, they have their ball game. You move within the regional economic groups, it's a ball game. Yeah. So looking at that, that's one thing. Then the cost factor of visa itself, high cost visa is another impediment also. I'm sure you having an American, and I'm traveling also on an EU passport, but you find that you do pay quite a bit. Yeah. But nevertheless, we also have other challenges, limited visa facilitation services. How can we overcome this hurdle also? Because we try to create a smooth model process, but still the frameworks are not in place. Another thing is we have quite a number of restrictions on business as well as leisure travelers. Excessive documentation proof required. Bring that paper, bring that paper, bring that paper. So when we have these limited regional visa agreements that basically we don't have, as I mentioned, you're traveling from ECOWAS, you want to access SADC, for example, you need a visa. So why we don't start pushing the agenda of creating regional visa agreements in a way, yeah? ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, and all the rest of it. I think that's a starting point before we go into a full-blown visa-free kind of element within the continent. But of course, on a personal level, I have my own recommendations. One, we need to establish regional visa agreements, where basically we can be able to facilitate freedom of movement across the continent. And two, we need to establish a continental pan-African digital visa system too, yeah? Because every time you go here, you access the ETC for here, yeah? Another thing is why we don't start pushing for a pan-African passport too, Because if we try to push the agenda of freedom of movement, it requires specific documentation that allows that mobility to take effect, yeah? Then, of course, I think policy is another thing where we basically have to align and, of course, push for advocacy. So generally, on a personal feeling level, I think it's quite frustrating to travel within your own continent and being impeded by visa constraints. So at the end of the day, that's basically limiting, the leisure travelers. For business, mainly, you may find that the processing might be fast-tracked, yeah? Because of all the paper required, it's obviously straightforward. But for leisure travelers, I think that's something that we really need to address to remove this emotional distress, if you like, that comes with visa applications. Yeah. So in the end, countries are losing traffic, as what Ali said before. If you're marketing a destination, you're also trying to increase traffic of people, yeah? But of course, if there's a constraint due to visa expectations, that already limits that particular kind of prospect. So overall, I think we really need to make some improvements on this here and start pushing more a common wide African agenda in order to facilitate mobility of African travelers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there another hand? Okay, I see a gentleman here and a lady there. So we take the two questions and that will be it. Our time is up.
Thank you very much.
Introduce yourself, please, for your
Thank
question.
you very much. My name is Thierry Havgimana. I'm from Rwanda Polytechnic. I'm the founder of Aviation Travel Enthusiast Club. My question goes to Madame Anne, Deputy CEO of Rwanda's airport company. My question, let me relate the seamless air travel with the sustainability or sustainable development. So I would like to ask what are you doing as the aviation institutions down to the local communities so that they can get benefits from the big or luxury industry as aviation? And what are you doing to see the contribution of aviation beneficiaries in the context of travelers to fight this battle of sustainability? Because we cannot fight around this battle. We need also to include the travelers or the people also to fight in this sustainability journey. What are you doing to make them fight together with us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we have a last question, then we can respond to the two. Briefly, Madam.
Thank you very much. Sarah Bruce from Barca. I've just got a question for the whole panel here. How can African states balance protection of national carriers with encouraging fair competition for startups?
Sorry, you're a bit faint.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This is a question for the whole panel. How can African states balance protection of national carriers with encouraging fair competition for startups? And for you, Raphael, what role can AFRA play in improving startup airline survival rates? Thank you.
Thank you. So the second question is for all of us. So we start with the question for Eva first.
Okay. If I start with the sustainability question, at the Rwanda Airports Company, one of the measures we've started to implement now is we're working with some companies that would like to establish electric vehicle charging stations. So that's a way to facilitate. It would be open to everyone, not just airport users. We are also looking at how we can phase out some of the fuel vehicles we're using airside and replace them with electric. I think most of our initiatives now we're kind of looking towards the new airport, but we are looking at how we can modernize what we do have to have more efficient and less wasteful energy. So, because we do use a lot of power, you know, as an airport, every month when we get that electricity bill, it's a bit shocking. But we are trying to see how we can look at alternative energy sources while also balancing the safety issue. But it is something that is dear to us. And to then connect it to how we work with our communities, we have different initiatives. Right now we are in the commemoration period, and as the whole aviation community, we not only hold the commemoration events, but we are looking at how we can help the communities in need in a more sustainable manner, so it's not just giving a check today, but rather how can we give you something that will change your life in any way. One of the other ways is we bring in students, a lot of student tours, from little kids in kindergarten to primary and secondary school, so that they do learn about aviation. You know, we mentioned that such a small number of Africans travel, and we want these kids to see what this industry is, to look at a plane, all of that, and when they go home, you ask them what they want to be when they grow up. You know, we're opening their minds, and also taking it past just the pilots and the cabin crew, but we want them to think of all the other portions of the industry, and I think that's a way to reach the community and bring them in the future. We are also working with local education facilities, especially when we're thinking of the new airport. We want to work with them so that when we're looking for interns and people to train to work at the new airport, we start with those students. We don't go just looking on the market already or even internationally. We want to get these kids and train them, and that's the workforce is tomorrow. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So there are a lot of social intervention initiatives that are being done in that regard. So then the second question was about what we can do to avoid discrimination between state-owned airlines and privately owned airlines to ensure fair competition. That was the question. Prof?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Yeah, briefly, our time is almost up.
Okay, we're all ready for lunchtime anyway. So I think protectionism is a key issue in Africa, you know, especially when national carriers are being sheltered from competition, you know, through, you know, government subsidies, maybe, you know, protecting specific city pair routes, for example. So I think what we need to see in order to create an even playing field is we have to push the mandate for AFCAC to have more powers when it comes to violations of competition rules. Because right now, you know, when you talk about competition, it's not only about, you know, predatory pricing, it all comes in all different formats, you know. If you're subsidizing a national carrier, that's already unfair in the fair interest of competition. So I think to promote an even playing field, we need to also ensure that the regulatory authorities like COMESA, for example, EAC, you know, competition authorities do have the enforcement powers to make sure that we do push the agenda of establishing a free market open economy that can benefit all carriers in a way. And obviously, as we said earlier, you know, that has already created a lot of barriers for market entry, especially for startups, you know. So when you know already that the national champions are already being sheltered, so as a way to penetrate market, it becomes extremely difficult. So that's the reason why I think we need to give these regulatory commission powers to make those amendments, especially when it comes to violation of competition rules. But I think everything falls under the AFFCTA, you know, the competition protocol, of course, which means that if we are trying to establish a common ground for Africa, we need to create a really even playing field that will benefit both the existing carriers as well as new startups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know whether anyone has anything else to add. Otherwise, I bring the curtain down here. We've already overshot our time. So I want to, ladies and gentlemen, to thank my guest for doing justice to the topic and giving us a lot of food for thought. A round of applause for them, please. I also want to thank all of you for your patience and endurance up till this time. And from now onwards, when we get up from here, lunch is served. And the attendants will show us where to do lunch. But just wait until we've had our photo shot before you leave. So thank you very much.